Okay, and we are live. First time ever live on Being Human, I'm delighted to say. Gillian McMichael, who's our guest today, has bravely agreed to go with this inaugural live broadcast. So thank you, Gillian.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the show. Gillian McMichael is, a phenomenon, right? We were just going through as you came on all of the things you're qualified in. You're a yoga teacher, you're a meditation mindfulness teacher, you've coached over 10,000 people as a master coach. You've got your own podcast, the Full Circle podcast. You're a Reiki energy healer. You've actually trained 8,000 students to become professional coaches. So I can't wait to have this conversation today, Gillian.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and a bit nervous, but we'll go with the flow, right? Because it's live.
It's live, and in fact, I've never dealt with this before. We've got Karen Rylance, who welcome. Good morning, Jesse. Good morning. Okay, so I've read the book. You know, you're also an author of this book, Coming Home. I actually listened to the book on Audible. A Guide to Being Your True Self. Really love the book, and you really you're vulnerable. You walk your talk in this in terms of your early experiences that ultimately led you to this path of coaching, and then all of the other things that I just mentioned. So for those who are not familiar with you and your work, maybe you could give us some of the backstory that ultimately brought you to becoming a coach and healer and all of the other things we've talked about.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose my background up until 2004 was I was in human resources and learning and development. I'd become I was a late student. I was a mature student to get my CIPD qualification and a range of other different things. And I suppose I was in HR and I liked HR and mainly, started off with recruitment. So I was in recruitment selection for a while and then moved into a bit more L&D, so learning and development, and then did some generalist work. But in my last HR kind of role that I had, I was a global HR business partner, and they wanted to find out more about coaching. And I was a bit like, oh, what's all this about? And, we thought we did coaching, like a lot of maybe HR professionals also would recognize this as well. But you think you do coaching, but actually you're really mentoring or guiding and advising. And so I got really involved in understanding a little bit more about what coaching was and how we could bring that back into our organization. And I decided then to train as a life coach. And I saw the tiniest of little adverts. This is before the internet basically was even existed. And this certainly would never have existed then. So it was a little advert. And I thought, well, why not? Let's see what it's like. And so I trained to become a life coach. And it really changed my world and changed my whole outlook on life. And then after that, I set up my first business, which was a company called New You Coaching, and did that for around 7 years. Lost all of that in the recession and a range of other different things, which I'm sure we'll delve into. And then started to rebuild in 2010. And, that's where my journey started to find out more about who I really was. I mean, I'd done a lot of work on myself beforehand, but not as much as what happened from 2010 onwards. And so that's when I learned to meditate, become a mindfulness and meditation teacher with Chopra Center. Then decided to become an Ayurvedic perfect health teacher through Chopra again. And then moved into yoga teaching, working towards becoming a Reiki master, which I became a Reiki master last year. So Reiki healer, but kind of the I suppose the highest level. And I suppose I've been working towards that master coach level, and I've been now master coach with the International Coach Federation for around 6.5 years.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And in the book, you even your route to HR was not perhaps a traditional route, right? You didn't go kind of university, corporate job. Yeah. Tell us a bit about that. I found that.
So I was really into drama when I was younger. As a little girl, I used to lie in the bed with my, head over my, kind of on my hands, kind of dreaming about being famous and dreaming about, being an actress and everything. But what happened was I didn't actually get the qualifications that I wanted. I was most probably lacked a lot of self-confidence through school. As people, if they've read the book, they'll remember this from it. But I got bullied an awful lot, really, from being the age of 8 years old. We moved house when I was 8 to a new town, a smaller town in a different location from what we were familiar with. And we went to this school, and my brother, who was a few years younger than me, fit in brilliantly. I didn't. I seemed that, I don't know, people thought maybe I was a bit different. And so I started to get bullied from 8 years onwards, all the way really through until I left school. And actually beyond that, to be fair, I lived in a very small town. It was a market town. Everybody knew everybody. And I suppose the new girl just didn't really fit in. And so I lost my confidence a lot, actually, and my self-belief and a lot of my self-worth started to kind of drift away. I'd play, many roles to try and fit in. All I wanted to do was to belong and to be liked, like I think most people do. And certainly as a young girl, that was really important to me at the time. And that was, I think realistically, those were quite traumatic times. And I think, when we think about bullying today, I think it would have been maybe nipped in the bud by the school or maybe by my parents more. But because there was that kind of theory, wasn't that, well, that, tomorrow it'll be kind of the fish and chip paper kind of thing, so don't need to worry about it. You'll be fine, just kind of crack on with it. So it was this kind of, just kind of get on with it. And because that was, I suppose, the mentality of those around me, I just kind of did try to get on with it. But actually, it really fundamentally affected with who I was. And I really lost myself. And I think, when I look back to those early years, and I do say this in the book, that for me, those were I started to play so many different roles that I completely lost who I was, because all I wanted to do was to fit in and be liked. And so that led, I suppose, then to me being very anxious at times, very nervous. I would play, different roles. I'd play this kind of, well, I'm all right kind of thing, and you might see this with people that but, where they're steeped in vulnerability, but they act kind of everything's all right and they kind of act tough. Most probably driven very much by my ego, I would say, in terms of that protective state, trying to keep me safe and protected. But actually what it did was put a really hard shell on me. And so when it came to things like studying, I studied, but, I just didn't have the confidence. And so when I did my A-levels, I didn't get the results that I wanted. Again, this was another kind of another kind of level of humiliation for me. I'd had quite a lot of humiliation through the years. And this was just another one of those moments where I let myself down. I didn't study enough. I don't know what happened, but I just didn't get the results that I wanted. And so it left me again feeling very vulnerable. And so, and actually, I remember my parents saying this, and please don't judge my parents for this because they're wonderful people. But, my mum said to me when I said I wanted to be an actress, she turned around and said, well, maybe you should need to learn to type as well, just so that you have that backup plan. And they were being very practical because they're northern people, very, kind of working class. And that's what we did. We always had a backup plan. But that also affected me because it made me think, well, maybe I can't do this. Maybe I can't be an actress. And so after failing the exams, I learned to type and I became an admin and secretarial, secretary for a while. And again, there's nothing wrong in that role or job, but it just wasn't where I wanted to be. And I felt very frustrated with myself. I felt very disillusioned and I suppose, angry maybe a little bit at the world and myself, and hadn't, I suppose, because coaching, I wasn't familiar with coaching at them days, I was just way too young for that. So I was looking for other things to kind of hang that situation on. And so it was very easy for me to point the finger at other people and not really look at myself, because it was easy to blame others. And I think it is very easy to blame others and not really look at yourself. And so there was a lot of that going on. And then I got this opportunity. I was really, kind of climbing the walls. I was thinking, well, I can't keep doing this. I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. I just felt that there was something bigger and something maybe more meaningful for me to do. But I didn't know what that was. So I searched for lots of different jobs. I went to Stockholm for an interview to work for a design company. I was going to kind of really push it, moving to London and trying all these different things. But before I did any of those kind of more permanent moves, like to London, which I did in my early 20s, I found myself getting a job as a holiday representative, so a holiday rep basically. And what was interesting, I suppose, I would maybe class myself as being kind of an attractive looking woman in those days. I was only 21, I think, at the time when I went to Greece. And I was due to work for a really nice family brand, a really, really nice family branded organization, part of this organization. But the big boss was there on the last day, and he said, she's not going there. She can go to the 20s group, which was kind of like the equivalent to Club 18 to 30s at the time, based upon how I looked, I think, at the time. So I got posted to a place called Falaraki, which is in Greece, which was a really big party place at the time. And to be honest, I very naive. I'd never lived away from home before, so didn't know what to expect. I remember getting off the plane and my boss being there and my colleague, there was two of them. And they said, right, initiation. This is like, 2 a.m. in the morning, initiation. And they took me to a bar and they insisted I drank 20 tequila slammers to show that I could drink. I'd actually not been a drinker before that point. And, found myself in a world that I was so unfamiliar with. And I felt once again thinking that this would have been my dream job, kind of, working with people, helping people have a really nice time on their holidays and things like that, working with children and families, which I wanted to do. Now working with, groups of gangs of lads, gangs of girls coming on these holidays where all it was about boozing and having sex, most probably, and I found myself in a world that I was very, very unfamiliar with and very much out of my depth. Yeah. And that then obviously led on to a number of different experiences whilst I was there. And then, after that, realized I couldn't do that work. I'm very happy to talk about things, but I don't know if you want to ask me some questions about it. I'm not sure, because I would kind of want it to be a monologue. And then came back from Greece very broken, more broken than I'd gone, and really didn't know what to do with myself. And that's when I decided to go to London, and I got myself then involved in HR, and I studied and kind of reset things after that experience.
Yeah, and that's what you shared in the book, which I really appreciated, the fact that you were prepared to talk about some of those more painful experiences that you had there, and how that affected you, because I think other people will resonate it. So are you happy to share there was one particular experience there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think because I'd been bullied, I'd had quite a lot of verbal abuse throughout my younger years, as I described, and actually that didn't change. I thought I was going to Greece to kind of reset, to have this amazing experience, and it just didn't turn out to be like that. I needed to drink, and I was told to dance on bars, told to be provocative with punters so that they would buy trips and, days outs and things like that. And again, very much out of my comfort zone. And then obviously, because it was the beginning of the season, my hotel where I was staying wasn't ready. So I had to share a room with my colleague, a female colleague. And on one of these nights that we'd gone out and about and all of the things that I had to do in terms of initiation and getting myself ready and all of those things, I found myself very drunk, asleep, and and my boss, who was male, was on top of me, I suppose, and doing things that he shouldn't have been doing to me, in essence, which was really disturbing and really frightening. Actually, I was 21. Only ever had one relationship before, and found myself completely, not knowing what to do, but panicking and freaking, as you would imagine, freaking out. And this isn't in the book, but my colleague just lay there. She was there in the room and just rolled over and just ignored what was happening. And I found that even more traumatic.
Right.
That somebody who I thought I could trust, who I just started to build a relationship with as a colleague, didn't actually help. So I battled my way out of that, literally kicking and screaming and really, biting and fighting. And, when I complained about it, I went to my big boss. I had a meeting with him. He told me just to stop being so bouffant and to shut up and put up, was his words.
Oh, man.
So I was very traumatized by that, but I didn't know what to do because I thought I'd done the right thing by talking about it. I got told to get back get back and work, get back on the bar, so to speak, and to shake my ass for the punters was the exact phrase, if I remember rightly at the time. And that's what I did. But that went on for about, maybe there for about, I don't know, maybe 9 weeks, 10 weeks. And I just couldn't cope. And I remember phoning home. I didn't tell my parents what had happened, not told anybody really what had happened until, in fact, recently, actually, funny enough. And I came back, I got told that they would give me only a hand luggage to get back on the plane. I couldn't take any of the belongings that I brought. I had to leave them. And I had to go that night if I wanted to go. And that was the only opportunity for me to get back, that they would pay for my flight. And basically it was good riddance, because they see me as being trouble. So that was what happened. So I suppose after that, I slept for about 6 weeks. I was very traumatized. My mum didn't know what was going on, I don't think, at the time. And I should have been, maybe in hindsight, more fairer and shared what had happened. But I was hugely, hugely humiliated, and I felt a complete and utter failure. I mean, a real complete and utter failure. And, after that, I started to look for work, and I went back to being a secretary and admin for a while, because that's what I could get a job in. But again, my confidence was shot to bits. I had no self-worth, no self-belief. And because I'd been heavily drinking in Greece, because it was my job and I was forced to drink in the way that I was forced to drink, maybe people might have said, well, you could have said no. I could have said no, but I would have been fired. And, I didn't want to be a failure. So I thought this job would have been that opportunity for me to really create something for myself. And so, and I didn't want to go back to where I was, because I'd had such an awful time when I was a child and a teenager. I was like, this was what I thought was my golden ticket, to have this great career, this great this restart, this fresh kind of career opportunity. And, it just didn't work out that way. And so, it took me quite a while, but I was drinking. I'm certainly never been an alcoholic, but I was using alcohol, I think, as a numbing, thing. And I moved to London after that. And through that process, I still wasn't my true self. In fact, I think I was most probably further away from my true self than I would ever have been. And I didn't really know who I was. All I knew is that I needed to survive. I needed some work and I needed to get away. And London gave me that space to at least figure out what I could do. And I got myself a job in admin to begin with in London, and then very quickly got the opportunity to move into recruitment and then into HR. And that's when I did my HR qualification and then moved into that role.
Right. And during that period, you were burying those thoughts. How were you dealing with what had happened? What was your strategy?
Well, I just boxed them away. And I think many women do that or have done that. And
Ben, I can confirm.
Yeah, you just put it away, right? You neatly put it in a box. You're like, okay, that happened. I'm not going to think about that. So you just choose to ignore it. But deep down that there's just something not right within, and you can't really. And sometimes, I would even forget about it because I buried it so deeply. Great, the brain's amazing, right? It can do whatever we need it to at times. But yet there was always something there. And I think for me, it turned out in that kind of lack of self-belief and lack of self-worth. And that just showed up in every aspect of my life, and did so, I would say, until around 2010, when I started to change things.
Oh, wow. So, but something was keeping you going through these HR jobs. What was it that was driving you?
I think really deep down, I'm very resilient as a human being, and I think I have a real deep inner strength that I most. I think maybe that was some of the things that I learned from being young when I was bullied at school. You do become tough. You do get an outer shell, and you cope. You survive, because otherwise, what options do you have? And one of the things I've always been adamant about is that I will keep, regardless of what's happened, I will always kind of keep a positive mindset, even though I might not have believed in myself. I would still push myself forward for things. I would still, be ambitious in many ways, I think in essence now, I was most probably trying to prove my self-worth to myself when I look back now. But something kept me going, and I can only say it was strength and resilience, and maybe deep down somewhere within me was a belief that actually I wasn't a bad person. I actually am a nice and a good person. And there was a lot of, and I think somewhere deep in me kind of just kept me going, and so I just kept going. But I didn't stop and reflect, I mean, and now in hindsight, now that I've stopped and reflected, you can learn an awful lot from those experiences. But at the time, I think I was just fighting and surviving. I wouldn't say I was thriving in any way, but I was definitely surviving.
Yeah. And you had this ambition and drive in spite of your lack of self-esteem. And
which is quite ironic. I'm not quite sure how, it's kind of so polar opposites in many ways. But I just didn't want to give up.
Right.
I was adamant there was no way I was giving up on my life and no way that I was giving up on me.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is like it's about proving that you're not something, proving I'm not a failure, I'm not this.
Yes, exactly. And I think that was definitely the driver.
I am great, or whatever it
is. For sure, definitely.
And so you hadn't started the self-reflection, and so but you were progressing, you were getting these various jobs. So when was it that the self-reflection started?
Well, so I'd had a successful business. So I'd moved from London, moved up to Edinburgh. In a nutshell, again, I don't know. I have maybe an entrepreneurial spirit somewhere deep down within me, and literally tossed a coin, heads Edinburgh, tails Brighton, and Edinburgh came up. So moved to Edinburgh. And I was with my ex-husband at the time. Wasn't my husband at the time, but my ex-husband at the time. And we moved to Edinburgh. And I then worked in HR for a period of time. But this is when I'd got kind of really interested in coaching and what it was all about, and then did the training. And so, New You was born out of that, New You Coaching. And it was a very successful coach training organization. We were only the third coach training provider in the UK at the time. Right. There's nobody. We were the first in Scotland at the time, and so we, it was a good business, a solid business, for quite a number of years. And then 2008 came, recession hit, and my husband and I went through a very difficult time. I had my son at that time, who was a couple of years. He was 2008. He was, I can't remember how old he was now, about 4 or 5, something like that. And we're going through a really tricky time, and we decided to separate. And my husband at this time was part of the business. He was involved in the business. He'd left his corporate job to come on board in the business, which was, in hindsight, not the best thing to do, but it's what happened. And we had a really turbulent time, actually.
Yeah.
So clients stopped paying. People were just pulling out left, right, and center. So the cash flow was really, as you'd imagine with any recession, but it was the worst thing I think it was probably one of the worst things I'd experienced, apart from my experience in Greece. But really quite, again, traumatic, because having to lay people off, we couldn't afford, arrange the things. And then through in the midst of all of this, then we decided to separate and get divorced. And that was really, really difficult, because once again, I'd failed at school, I'd failed in my business, I failed in my marriage. The one thing I was really good at was a mum, so I really held on to that. So I was really good at being a mum, and I still am a great mum. And so that all crumbled, and that left me going into liquidation in 2010, which was, again, hugely humiliating, and especially when your name and you're in the newspaper and you're labeled as a failure by the newspaper. And everyone that, was associated with the business got looked after. I was really insistent on making sure that everybody, so I took personal loans out to make sure people got paid. They got 3-4 months salary. And that left me with a huge amount of debt. Now, a lot of that debt wasn't due to just me. The debt was for the business as well.
Yeah.
And the bank decided that they wanted that money back. So with all those accumulated debts, the debts that my ex-husband had also accumulated and a range of other different things, that left me with £97,000 worth of debt. And within 6 months, I lost my home, my car went, I got driven away, my business and my marriage, all gone. And just me and my son with a few suitcases, and we had to start again.
God.
So yeah, so quite really, really turbulent. But in hindsight, I can sit here now and say that was the best thing that ever happened to me. In all of that, it took me 7 years to pay off the debt. So it took me 7 years to pay off the debt, and I paid every single penny off. We had 100 students who had paid for courses that needed to be trained. So I did all that. I honoured. Obviously, I wasn't getting paid of the business. It all went, So
Right.
my mum and dad gave me a loan for a rent, 1 month, kind of rent and deposit for the first couple of months on a flat for me and my son, because my son was in school. We couldn't take it. We didn't want to take him out of school and move anywhere. And so again, it was kind of sink or swim. What do I do? Do I sink, and do I just or what do I do? And so I decided to swim. I was, I was an ACC coach at the time. ACC coach at the time, which is one of the credential coaches through the ICF route. And I thought, right, okay, I'm gonna need to put my skills into practice here and do something for myself. And through the support of my family and friends that I had at the time, I got myself back on track. But it took 7 years to clear the debt and to get back on track. And I suppose through that process, I realized that something else was really kind of stirring within me. There was this kind of need to understand, well, who am I? Because literally everything had been stripped back.
Yeah.
And actually having to start again was really difficult, because the energy and the emotions and trying to really say, look, this wasn't all you're doing. There was a number of factors. I had to really look at it very pragmatically. Don't get me wrong. There were moments when, I had my victim mode and why me and all this kind of thing that you do, and cry and shout and slam your hands on the floor and, but I
isn't that part of it? Like your ability
to
just let the emotions out, right?
The emotions need to come out, and it came out, and I did cry a lot. And I was very angry again, not just at myself, but, at the circumstance and the situation. But again, I kept questioning, what was it about what I did? Because I was involved in this. What allowed this to happen? And I was involved in it. So I had responsibility. So I decided to take that responsibility, which was most probably out, there was a number of things I could have done earlier, but didn't do. So there's lots of learning. Right. And I tried my hardest not to beat myself up, but to actually to look at it as, okay, what can I do? Because I have to survive. Not only now do I have myself to look after, I have my 6-year-old son who needs stability consistently. I need to earn money. And now I could have gone and got a job. I could have gone and got a job back in HR or something like that. And I did go for interviews and I did consider all of that. But I got stopped in the street by a friend of mine who's a very, very close friend now. She was actually a client. And she said, why don't you just come in and have a chat with us? We can't promise you that we can give you work, but why don't you come in and have a chat with us? Because I told her what had happened and everything. And she was HR of a renewable energy company. And I had to go in and I had to explain all my financial circumstances and and that was quite humiliating to their financial director. But actually, they gave me an olive branch and they gave me a piece of corporate work, and I went back and did coaching and leadership development for them. And then that led on to me. I felt more confident then to reach out to. I worked with the NHS, for example, and I reached out to them and my contacts there and explained what had happened. And although I was embarrassed, and there was a huge amount of shame. A huge amount of shame.
And how did you handle that shame?
Well, to be honest, I journaled a lot.
Right.
I started to write. So this, I suppose, is the foundation of the book, I suppose. Yeah. So I started to write, and I would journal everything. I would, ask myself questions and pose myself questions every day. I set myself a coaching plan. Somebody that I knew had provided an opportunity for me to do a spreadsheet so I could understand how much debt I was paying back every month. And it was only small to begin with. And then it started to get bigger payments. So I felt like I could start to get control over things again and wasn't kind of lost out at sea. that I'd been at the very beginning. And so I suppose through planning and reflection and to learn, I think, and actually to be very grateful. I was tremendously grateful that NHS gave me a piece of work and this other corporate client gave me a piece of work. And and the irony of when you go into liquidation and the liquidation company say to you, well, we've got all your database and we know you've got no money, but if you pay us 10 grand, we'll give you all the database. So, which was really interesting. So thankfully, I didn't need that database, but I started to build up my contacts and I reached out to people. I spoke to the ICF. I told them what had happened. And they said that, well, look, the qualification, because I do accredited courses, so I didn't want to lose my livelihood. And they said, well, we've noticed what you've done. You've honored your, responsibilities and for training people and blah, blah, blah. You've done all of that. And so in return, we'll honor what you've done and we'll let you keep the accreditation. And so that's what happened. So I could start to rebuild. So I started to put on 1 or 2 courses just to get back. I was paying the debt off gradually. And then over those 7 years, I started to really learn more about meditation and mindfulness and all of that kind of thing. But it was funny because I had, there's a book that says the body keeps the score. And yes. I think if you've ever read it, you'll know what it's about. Yeah. But it's very true because over that period of time, within the first kind of year and a bit of trying to rebuild and survive, I got adult asthma, which I'd never had before. Massive asthma attack, ended up going to the hospitals and all sorts of things. Yeah. After a bad chest infection, my body was exhausted, basically.
Right.
I don't think I was really thinking straight. I think I was just doing and just going through the work that I needed to do because I had to. Not because I had to, I wanted to do the work, but I needed to survive and to provide. But I don't think I was really paying attention to my own well-being. And so the consultant said to me, have you ever tried meditation? And I was like, no. And he said, well, you should do. And I'd put on a huge amount of weight because I was not really looking after myself. I was, like I said, I wasn't an alcoholic, but I was drinking on a Friday night and on a Saturday just as a comfort because, that's kind of what you did. Yeah. And I think most people still do that now. And I was eating, and even though I was trying to lose weight, I couldn't lose weight. And I think that's because I wasn't dealing with the emotional aspects of what was going on within me.
So you were journaling, but it wasn't going deep into the emotions, would you say?
The journaling was emotional. Was emotional, but I think I was just talking about it. And okay. I don't think I'd connected with it as being me. So it was it was deep. But I think it was, I'm saying it was deep, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I can't, it's funny. Maybe it's not as deep as it was, but there was just something that I don't feel I was being really honest with myself through the process.
Right.
And so I couldn't lose weight. I was going to the gym. I was running. I was trying anything that I could do to lose weight. And so I went to a nutritionist and he said to me, if you don't change your lifestyle, you're going to get diabetes and other really big illness. Because the amount of adrenaline and cortisol that was in my body at the time was just hugely, really, really dangerous. And so he put me on a kind of particular diet that I needed to eat and lifestyle kind of approach. And that was really, really helpful. And over time, I started, but he also said, you maybe need to meditate. And then the next day, my inbox, surprise, surprise, came Deepak Chopra and Oprah Winfrey, learn to meditate 21 days for free. And I was like, well, this is for free. This is awesome. So I jumped in with both feet. And then after that, I was hooked and I meditated every day ever since. And then trained with the Chopra Center to be a meditation and mindfulness teacher. And I would say that most probably meditation really did help save me, I think, in terms of, and also what it did is it started to calm my mind down. It started to really help me find that kind of inner peace and a little bit more peace and quietness that I needed because I was just doing all the time because I was in that constant high alert state and had been really most probably from 8 years old. And so I really felt that I needed to just try and tune in more to myself. And that's when I started to realize who I really was. And that's when I started to walk back home to my true self.
Right. And you mentioned earlier this emotional, you were journaling, but maybe you weren't going too deep on the emotionals, on your emotions.
Yeah.
you find that the meditation was giving you peace. Was it also allowing you to connect emotionally at a deeper level?
Yeah, it was. And alongside that, I got some therapy. So I did mix it with a mixture of things. I went and got some therapy to talk about loss of marriage and business and all of that kind of thing. So I did a fair bit of work on with therapy around that. I also was receiving Reiki on a monthly basis. Couldn't afford any more than that, but a monthly basis, and I got that done on a monthly basis. And I was doing everything free regarding meditation at that time at the beginning. And so I think the combination of those things really started to help me, reconnect with myself and really truly get to that more honest version of me and who I was and what was really going on for me. And I didn't know who that was. I mean, I actually didn't know who I was. I could say, well, yeah, I'm Gillian, and this is what I do. But there were so many labels. I didn't actually really know who I truly was.
Yeah, and I like that section in the book when you go through, well, yes, I'm a mum, and yes, I'm a coach, and yes, but you just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going and keep going until you get, well, I mean, I just come up with, well, I am me, but then, you expand that out. And on the back of that, I needed to understand actually, well, what did me look like? If I was really being true to myself, what would that look and feel like? And how would I live my life? And what choices would I make? And I think, especially when you've been through a fair bit of trauma on and off, and there's loads of different traumas. There's some, big T, little t trauma. And certainly I'm not comparing my trauma to anybody else's, but for me, there was a fair amount of trauma, I would say, throughout my life growing up. And I think you always want to please, and I think you always want to second guess. And this was my opportunity to drop that role of needing to belong and needing to fit in and wanting to be liked, more than anything else. For me, the key thing was that I needed to like myself. I needed to learn to love myself. That was the journey that I was deciding to take. I needed to get to that place because I knew that's what would bring me contentment, happiness, and joy. And I believe that we all have the opportunity to try and find that in some way, shape, or form for us, because at the end of the day, I don't think life is meant to be that hard, although it is hard and it's very challenging for people. But when you start to learn to like yourself or even to love yourself, and not many of us do love ourselves, but when you do, it releases you completely from that past conditioning and from those roles and all of that hurt, shame, and pain that we carry with us. And I think that was the greatest gift I could have given myself. But that did come through a lot of hard work and over a decade of investment in myself.
Yeah, and that's what people don't always want to hear, right? Like,
no, they want a quick fix.
You want to measure that. Yeah, that's exactly been my experience. I measure my progress in decades, not six sessions or
No,
it's
an ongoing process, and I think that's what I've now accepted. That for me to continue to be true to me, it's a lifelong journey. It's not. It's a way of being. It's not something that you have a quick fix and it's going to get managed really, really quickly and it's going to be better, because you have to keep working on it every day. And so hence ritual and routine are very important to me. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to make sure that they have some sort of routine. I don't know what you do, but certainly routine is very important for me. And knowing that I get up every day and meditate, I will do my yoga or some exercise. I will journal throughout the day at some point. I will reflect upon myself and check in with myself. I get coached. I still receive Reiki, even though I give Reiki. I still look at my, my nutrition and my exercise and my bedtime routine, making sure that I'm getting my, the 8 hours sleep that I need every night. And I still drink, but I don't drink an awful lot anymore. I might have a glass of wine with dinner if I go out for dinner, but apart from that, I don't drink really anymore. And I find that with that combination of ritual and lifestyle choices, it can really make a big difference to how you view yourself and how you experience yourself in the world.
Yeah. And let's definitely dive into that. Well, I'm also intrigued though. You said when you started with, you had the Reiki going, the therapy, you're doing your meditation, and then you're you asking yourself these deeper questions, did they just come to you and you think, I should really start asking these questions? Or how did that emerge in the process?
Well, a lot of those questions I'd most probably asked my clients before in the past, in my previous company. And I thought, well, I have a wealth of experience. I'd had 7 years at this, so I knew how to get to the root cause. But it's very easy as a coach to say, well, it's easy to do when you work with a client, but it's not necessarily always easy when you do the work on yourself. And so I really needed, and I think I wrote in the book that, to stand in front of the mirror and actually really look at yourself without criticizing yourself, without being brutal and cruel to yourself. And I think that was part of the journey. I knew that I needed to learn to befriend myself, because there was no way that I would speak to myself as I would speak to one of my friends. Yet I was, I was stupid, I was fat, I was ugly, you name it. I was all of these things alongside a failure and all of that stuff. And so that was my narrative. And, for me, I'm a firm believer. And this came from more of the Eastern philosophies that I've delved into the learning of the last decade, is that, what we think, so what we think we believe, and what we believe we become. And for me, that really stuck with me. And I thought, well, I need to really change how I speak about myself. I need to really change my narrative, because if I don't, then I'm always going to be in this position, feeling like a failure, feeling not good enough, not worthy, and blah, 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 and all of those things. And so I had to start changing that, and I had to befriend myself. And so I had to start to like myself. And I pushed myself, I went to dance classes when I'd never been to dance classes before, and I learned photography, and I wrote down a list, because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I liked doing anymore. And, I stared and looked at a blank piece of paper all day, not knowing what I could do. And actually, it was the simple things like listen to music, put on a favorite record, or put on a favorite, on iTunes or whatever, or Spotify, listen to something that just you really enjoy doing. Dance, silly things like dance around the kitchen, which I still do, and dance around my office every now and again when I feel like I need to shake some stuff off. Read a book, read a novel for the sake of just reading a novel and being present in the moment. And these are things that I'd just not done for so long. But what I realized by doing these simple things, that wasn't that expensive. It started to give me a lot more joy, and I started to change how I spoke to myself through the process of integrating different experiences and reconnecting with the things that I used to love doing. Riding a bike, going on the swings. My son was still young, took him down to the park. Instead of just pushing him, I was on the swing next to him. We're on the seesaw together, and having fun with it, and really being, having those moments of joy, which didn't cost anything apart from time.
Right.
And also giving yourself permission to be okay with yourself in those moments.
Yeah, and what came through in the book was your absolute dedication to get to answers, right? I can imagine a lot of people, they're given that kind of question from a coach, or who am I, or what gives me joy. They might spend 3 or 4 minutes on it, and then, but the fact you'd stare at a blank piece of paper for half and just keep going and stay in those questions until the answers emerge, and then take action on that and say, okay, well, the answer is singing. I'm going to go right. It's that total, the dedication to the self-work, really take these questions seriously, right?
It's interesting. Yeah. It's funny. I'd not really, it's only recently, actually, I came back from India. I did a yoga teacher training course, and I came back from India, and I realized that discipline leads to liberation. And I had a, discipline. I'm kind of thinking, being told off as a kid, and, we all have different relationship with the word discipline. But actually what I realized whilst I was in India and went through the training program I was on, and learned loads around Ayurvedic living and Vedic traditions and so forth, and real deep delve in Eastern philosophy, which was amazing. Really taught me that actually, if you set your mind to something and if you work at it every day, it will give you the freedom that you want, which is conscious choice and a conscious way of living and a conscious way of being. And that to me has been magic, to be able to to now realize that that's what I was doing.
Right.
Been through my determination and through my commitment to trying to understand what was going on for me and to try to really get to the root cause of who I am, because I didn't know who I was. And that then reminded me that actually, discipline does lead to liberation, which is, it's about hard work. It's about commitment. And one of the things I would say about myself, even from being a little girl, is that I have always had a very strong work ethic. And once I decide to do something, I like to put it into action.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's been a constant theme throughout my life so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you were applying sort of externally out there, you were able to apply inwardly, right, to answer these questions and do the digging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You talked about, well, the other thing that you touched on there, but is a big topic in the book, is this idea of experience. Go out there and experience, and we focus on things, in the Western culture, and maybe increasingly globally, right? But and the importance, and you've just rattled off. Oh, when I was into this, so you have clearly had a very rich tapestry of experiences, and that's part of your commitment now. Is
I think for me, what I've learned also about myself is that, I really want to get to kind of learn from experts that can help me. And then I can then share that knowledge on with my clients and so forth. And so I've always been passionate about experiencing, a wide range of different things. And one of the things I think I've learned through this whole process since 2010, when I lost everything, was that actually I'm a lifelong learner. And even though I didn't do well at school, I have done so well as an adult in terms of my education and learning and qualifications. And what's interesting now is that I don't feel the need to prove myself. I'm doing it because I want to do it. And I love learning. And the more I learn about new philosophies or different takes on life, or, whatever it is that I'm learning, I always learn something about myself. And I think that for me is what keeps me really motivated and engaged in learning, is that I'm always learning more about myself, because at the end of the day, I do want to be the best version of myself. I do want to live a long, healthy, vibrant life. I believe I've got a lot to offer the world and a lot to offer my clients and the work that I do and my family and friends. And, so therefore I need to be good, because how can I do the work that I do if I'm not good within myself?
And there's always more. You mentioned in the book, what the statistics, something like 10%. We manifest 10% of our potential.
Human potential, yes.
Human potential, right?
Yeah. So we've got 90% available. We can tap into more. And I think for me, I'm really curious to understand, well, what more is there for me, and what more can I learn, and what more can I offer the world?
Yeah. You mentioned daily routine. So what is the Gillian McMichael morning routine?
Morning routine is pretty straightforward. It's getting up around just before 6 or 6 a.m. at the latest. I will meditate. So I do an Ayurvedic thing, which is called a tongue scraper, where you get rid of all your toxins overnight, which is not very pleasant, but you do it anyway. So do all the teeth brushing and all of that kind of thing and that stuff. And then I will head into my office, where I will meditate. So I'll meditate. I will do either yoga or exercise, breathing. I chant some Vedic songs just to kind of bring in the day. I will journal, and then I'll get ready for work, have my breakfast, all of that kind of thing. And then evening routine will either be
that whole period from
from 6 till about 8:30, 9 o'clock when I start work. Yeah.
Oh right, so that is a big commitment.
Every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're doing 2.5 hours of.
I would say a full hour and a half, most probably, of doing stuff, maybe sometimes 2 hours, but on average about an hour and a half, an hour, 45 minutes. And then the rest of it's just getting ready and eating breakfast and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
takes me a while to get ready for work.
Sorry?
Takes me a while to get ready for work.
Yeah, but not in the way that people might expect, right? That's not all just doing your hair.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
That's right. Yeah. So, and the type of meditation you're doing, what's that?
So I learned and teach, and I still do myself, is a thing called primordial sound meditation, where I use my own personal mantra based upon the sound that the universe was making at the time of my birth. So the city, the location, so the city, the date, and the time. So it's quite a unique. It's actually one of the oldest meditation techniques. And so the Vedics, all them years ago, many, many years ago, obviously thousands of years ago, studied the lunar cycle. And when at certain times, obviously through that lunar cycle, the universe was making particular sounds, vibrations. So primordial sound, for example, is like the birds tweeting. It could be a river, trickle of a river or a stream. It could be the wind blowing through the trees, or just the universe just making its kind of normal sounds. And so it's based upon it's a mantra-based meditation. So I do that every morning. Sometimes I listen to other guided meditations, but not normally. I would light a candle, and I would then meditate based upon using my own primordial sound meditation.
Right. This is after, with your tongue feeling very clean.
Yes, with my tongue feeling very clean at this point, and my teeth brushed, so everything's all gleaming. Yes.
Right. And how long are you meditating for?
I do about half an hour meditation.
Okay.
30 minutes.
And then what are you doing for the rest of that? So you said you do journaling.
Yep. And
exercises.
then, and exercising, mainly stretching. I do breathing techniques. So I do a lot of pranayama. I mean, breathing. One of the things I realized for me is that I never actually wasn't, well, basically I wasn't breathing properly. I was very shallow breathing. And I think a lot of us are in a lot of high alert states. We do the shallow breathing. We don't really go, fully down into our belly. And so I do a lot of pranayama techniques around breathing. So I might do, alternate breathing. I will do the Brahmari breath. These are the breaths that I do as well. Coherent breathing, clearing breaths, like the connecting breath. There's loads of different breath techniques that I would use of the morning. And so I do breathing, do meditation, do my exercise, stretching, and whatever else I'm doing for exercise. Like this morning I was on the Peloton, but I'm going to yoga this evening. So, so I kind of mix it up a little bit. Sometimes, sometimes I'll just go for a walk because it's just nice to be outside in nature. I love being outside in nature. So you kind of mix it up a little bit just to keep the variety there. But I would always start off with meditation and breathing, and then exercise, and then a bit of journaling, and then get ready for work.
And your journaling now is focused on what? What do you?
A range of things, actually. It can just be that I might pose a question to myself. I might have observed a behavior or a reaction that I did the day before that I might want to understand a little bit more about what was going on for me in those moments. Or it just might be some wider, bigger stuff around purpose, life, what happens to the soul, all of that kind of thing. So, so it could be some bigger stuff, or it could be some more micro stuff that relates to me.
Right. Yeah. And it's just whatever emerges, you just allow yourself to go with what. Yeah. Yeah.
I learned a technique a long time ago just to start writing and keep the pen on the page. So try not to let the pen leave the page, and just write for 7 minutes. I only do it for about 7 minutes every day, and just see what comes up. And then I read it back, and then I will look at it and think, okay, so what does that tell me about myself? Or what's the message in this that I need to understand? So I do that.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Wow. Yeah. I mean, because I've also had a lot of, I also meditate in the morning, and I often do it, but I'm not at that level of, really committing that amount of time. And obviously it pays back for you over the course of the day.
It does. But I think to remember, for those that haven't meditated before, or those who feel, a bit daunted by meditation, you start off small. I started with 2 minutes, and I've built it up. I've been doing this now for over a decade, over 10 years. So I think for me, you start off small. And when I'm teaching meditation, I would always say that, 2 minutes a day, just 2 minutes of just quiet time for yourself. And then you build it up, next week you do 4, week after that you do 6, then you go to 8, and then you find that people can get more comfortable with it as we go through. But I think I'm a real advocate for meditation, because I just know it just allows you to connect more with your true self and gives you that opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I found exactly the same. It's very powerful. Great. I know we've spent an hour. This has been such a fabulous conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm also intrigued about. I can't let go about without the Reiki. Are you using that as part of your morning?
Yes. So I do a couple of times a week. I do Reiki to clear myself and my own energy. Managing energy is really important, because energy sticks. We get stuff. You could go on a bus and feel great on the bus, and then you get off the bus, you feel really rubbish. And it's not because the bus is late. It's just because the energy is transferred. And so I think for me, energy management is really important. I would say that to everybody, understand, what drains you, understand what gives you energy, and be conscious of those environments, people and situations and scenarios. But for me with Reiki, I do a couple of self-healing kind of processes a week for myself. And I still receive Reiki now by somebody else, because it's nice still to get that treatment and to be a customer of, to experience it as a client of Reiki. So that allows me just to fully kind of once a month just relax and just allow my, kind of that energy. And I suppose to kind of, unblock, because we have just quickly, we have our chakras, but we have
I'm really
72,000 nadi channels, which are energy channels that flow within our body. And they all kind of congregate around these kind of 7 wheels of energy, which are known as the chakras. And the 7 chakras get blocked, and so do those energy channels. And when our energy gets blocked, we can feel ungrounded, we can feel disconnected, it can affect our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, and all sorts of different things. And so it's very important that your energy channels are clear and clean, and open as much as we can have them. And so therefore, it's really important that I think if you have not experienced Reiki, then one, it's a great relaxation technique. It's a really good relaxation experience. But 2, it will unblock any negative energy or any blockages or any toxins that are kind of storing within your body. Because what we don't want to do is inflammation. We know that inflammation causes those more significant diseases and illnesses such as heart disease, diabetes, cholesterol, anxiety, even more anxiety and stress and depression and all of those things, and even bigger, heart conditions and so forth. And so we want to make sure that our energy is not building up into causing any inflammation within the body. And that's why I think this is a really important piece of my well-being. And I would definitely encourage it for other people to experience it as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing it up, because it's just isn't meditation is kind of, I think, accepted to some degree, in the West now, and mindfulness certainly has obviously become very popular. But I think Reiki and understanding of energy is still something that's, I suppose, at least the way I perceive it, a little bit more on the fringe out there. So I'm glad you're talking about it.
Yeah.
And is it something? And this is something you're able to bring into corporate clients now? Are you finding that?
Yeah, it is. So obviously I wouldn't necessarily do hands-on Reiki treatment with a corporate client or anything like that, but I do hold retreats. So for example, I've been running retreats in Mallorca once or twice a year. I've got my weekend retreats so we do a lot of healing work within those retreats. And so a lot of corporate people come on those, lots of different people come on those actually.
Yeah.
Where we combine that whole Eastern approach and philosophy into the modern day world that we live in. So making kind of those rituals or those practices really sustainable for people and manageable for people. So it's meditation and yoga and breathing and healing and Reiki and all sorts of things. So we do a lot of work on that and help people reconnect with themselves and be able to maintain and sustain the techniques when they get back home, which is the main thing.
Yeah, very important. And that's about routines.
Yes, that is about routine. Yes, exactly.
And stacking the habits, which is
exactly. And just because I have my routine in the way that I do doesn't mean to say it's going to work for everybody. You've got to find your own routine, and that's one thing I would say to any client is find a routine that works for you, and just stick to it. And stick to it longer than 21 days. Everyone says 21 days to create a habit. Well, it's not. It's actually over 30. So the longer you do it, the more it becomes part of your everyday life. And you've got to stop thinking about it as something that you do, and rather than it's something that you be. And I think that's the difference. There's a big difference between doing it and being it. And I think if you can make that shift over time through practice, then it will just be something. It'll be a lifestyle. It's your lifestyle rather than a diet or exercise routine or meditation routine. It's just part of who you are, and it's part of your life.
And I don't know if you find this, but there's this phrase where, first of all, you master the practice, and then the practice masters you, right? And it becomes like you almost, I find I can't not do it, right? So it takes a lot of discipline to begin with. But now if I skip a meditation, I feel like the debt of I need to get back on it, right?
Yes, and I think you will. I think once you get into it, you'll notice, for example, that you'll feel when you don't meditate, you feel different versus when you do meditate.
Exactly.
And I know for myself, if I don't meditate, and I don't beat myself up if I don't do it. If, for example, I don't know, maybe I'm traveling or something like that. I mean, I could still meditate on the plane or on a train, but I think the reality is if maybe you don't do it at the same time like you would do every morning, but you do notice the days that you don't do it versus the days when you do it. And I think for me, I can almost speak for myself, is that when I do it, my day flows more rather than when I don't do it. My day is less flowy, more clunky, I would say.
Yeah. The biggest barometer for me is my reaction to my kids, right? If I'm snapping at my kids,
exactly.
I know I've missed my meditation. Brilliant. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate this conversation, Gillian, and the fact you've been prepared to be so vulnerable and talk about the traumas as well as all of the routines and the practices that we've got into. So again, the book is Coming Home, a guide to being your true self for people who want that. And where would you send them, if they're interested in any of the approaches that you take?
Gillian? So you can get hold of me I've got my Full Circle Global website, so www.fullcircleglobal.com, or you could get hold of me at gillianmcmichael.com, either way. Alternatively, you can follow me on Instagram at Gillian McMichael. And there's lots of tools, techniques, tips for the day, all sorts of different things on there. So you're more than welcome to come along for the ride and enjoy that if you do. And you can also listen to my podcast, Finding Your Way Home, which is on Spotify and Apple as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, Gillian.
Thank you.